Hello and welcome to NJBIZ Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff Kanige. My guest today is a partner at Lowenstein Sandler, former state attorney general, and a great friend of the show, Chris Porrino. Chris, welcome back.
Jeff, thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to do it. I appreciate it. Now, there's a few issues I wanted to get your views on, starting with an op-ed you wrote for the New Jersey Monitor, I guess it was this week or last week, about the role of the state attorney general, something I think you know pretty well. The question, as I understand it, goes back to the Florio administration and Executive Order 6, I think which was issued in 1990, if I recall correctly.
Correct.
That mandates that state agencies, if I recall correctly, get all their legal advice from the attorney general rather than from lawyers within each agency. The question is, and obviously it's timely now that we're in the middle of a gubernatorial election, and how the next governor sets up his or her administration is going to be a question that we're all going to be interested in. Now, in your piece, you go through the pros and cons, and I wonder if you just take us through that a little bit, starting with the idea of a concentration of power in what is already an extraordinarily powerful governor's office in New Jersey.
Yeah, sure. Glad to do it, Jeff. And basically, this was like an open letter from me to the candidates. I figured if I actually wrote them a letter, they probably wouldn't read it. So this was my chance to get their attention, and hopefully they gave it a look. The issue really derives from one basic premise. Lawyers are involved in nearly everything that happens in state government. In 1990, Governor Florio, and I received a few emails from folks who worked in his administration, understood this and signed Executive Order 6 that required that all department and agencies rely exclusively on the AG for legal counsel, as opposed to having their own in-house lawyer. And the idea was to vest more power in the governor, right? To better control the inner workings of state government, since the AG and the governor are usually allies. Requiring that everyone in state government use the AG's office for counsel gives the governor, better opportunity to control operations. The other side of the coin, Jeff, as you know, is allowing department heads and agency heads to hire their own lawyers. That, I think, promotes independence and is probably more efficient when you've got your lawyer. If you're the head of, the education, and your lawyer is sitting next to you every day, that's probably more efficient. And that lawyer becomes conversant and presumably has expertise in the area that you need, as opposed to calling on the AG's office. Governor Christie strictly enforced it. Governor Murphy embraced, I think, the independence of the department heads and agencies. And, the way I sort of think about this is taking it back to business. Most CEOs want control of their entire legal team for all segments of the business through their general counsel. That's sort of what EO6 does. And my reason for raising it now is I just am hoping that the candidates, one of them soon to be governor, will actually give this some purposeful thought, as opposed to kind of backing into a decision without thinking about it in advance. Because, if you're in the business world, as so many of your readers are, Jeff, and you've got a problem, you think, for example, and I'm not picking on the DEP here, but, if the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, you believe is being overly aggressive on a particular issue. If the legal advice with regard to that issue is centralized in the AG's office, you can go to the AG's office, or you can go to the governor's office to ask them to intervene and to help. When the legal counsel is in-house at the DEP, when EO6 is not being enforced strictly, your sole recourse may be to the DEP commissioner himself. And that has pros and cons, both from the business perspective and from a governance perspective. But that's the kind of real life example that I think, the candidates should be thinking about as they, get closer to making a decision here.
Okay, all right. Now, there's a few things that you raised there. I want to go through them if we can. First of all, was EO6, the executive order, designed to fix a problem that had been identified? I mean, was there previously a an inefficient or a different way of doing things that Governor Florio was trying to fix?
So there are people who lived obviously then and were involved in preparing that executive order.
Uh-huh.
And I think the answer is yes. I
Okay.
think it was a step taken, perhaps I don't know for sure, by or through the encouragement of the then Attorney General um, to get better control over the legal representation of the departments and agencies. And I can tell you that, you know, every department and agency head in state government today, and when I was there, wants their own lawyer, right?
Right.
They want, their in-house lawyer sitting right beside them. And I understand that. I get it. And there's value in that. And, maybe it's better. I don't know. When I was there, it was it was helpful to be able to have sort of centralized legal discipline imposed across all departments and state agencies,
Okay.
at least from my perspective. But I
Okay.
have to say, I'm not sure what the better course is, but it's a big decision that the incoming governor will have to make.
Okay. Well, that was I was going to ask you what the right answer is, and I will do that. I just want to get to one thing
Yeah,
still
sure.
about the difference between now and 1990. 1990 was 35 years ago. The state government. I mean, you know this better than I do, but it seems to me that it's gotten much larger and more complex. Is it still is the Attorney General's office up to the task at this point of providing the kind of all-encompassing legal advice that we're talking about here?
So I think the answer is yes, but
Okay.
it will require if the next governor decides to strictly enforce EO6, it's gonna require some work because that is not the way the Division of Law, which is the civil side of the Attorney General's office, really has been operating in all respects. It does, for sure, provide legal advice across departments and agencies every day.
Right.
But taking the lawyers out of the department and agencies and either putting them back in the AG's office or not letting them act as lawyers will definitely require some transition
Okay.
because I think that's over the last 8 years that has really been the prevalent practice.
All right, and that's what I was going to clear up, though. This is really is the way. This is the way the current administration sort of set this up. And if either Jack Ciattarelli or Mikey Sherrill want to change that, they're going to have to rework the Attorney General's office.
I think there will need to be some adjustments for sure,
Okay.
and not all that difficult, but as long as you're purposeful about it. But there will need to be some adjustments.
Okay. You said you wanted to try to get the attention of the two candidates. Did you get their attention?
Look, I don't know. It's I'm just chirping from the cheap seats here, Jeff. I don't know whether this is something that the candidates are considering. I hope they are. Obviously, glad to talk to anyone about it if it is of interest. But I've been surprised by the outreach from folks who either weren't aware of the issue or had prior experience with it. It's definitely provoked some interesting conversations, some interesting emails from people I hadn't heard from in a bit, and some interesting chatter on social media.
Okay. Mikey Sherrill's a lawyer. Jack Ciattarelli is not. Does the difference in background make any? Is that going to make a difference in terms of how they approach this issue? Do you think?
I don't think so. They're
Okay.
both they're both really smart, and this issue once it's put in front of you, once you're aware of it, it's a it becomes pretty obvious from a leadership perspective. You either want to promote that efficiency and independence we talked about with having lawyers within the departments and agencies resident with the heads
Hmm.
of those department and agencies, or you want to take more control. And it's a decision that they'll make hopefully with their eyes open, and it's not that complicated. Implementation may be a little bit complicated,
Okay.
but they'll figure it out. You don't need to be a lawyer to figure that out.
Right. Okay. Well, you said you don't know what the right answer is, but what I hear from you is you kind of lean toward the centralized control part of it. That it because it's because of Just the way the governor operates and the way the state should operate.
Well, I lived it.
Right.
You know, I lived that
That's the other part. You were the
that
attorney general, so
that environment. I lived it not only as Attorney General, I lived it as Chief Counsel
right.
to Governor Christie at the time and as Director of the Division of Law, the civil side of the AG's office. And I saw some of the benefits. Like I said, if you asked, you know, the then treasurer, in state government while Christie was governor, I know what he'd say, and he's told me pretty recently. EO6 should be abolished and should never be spoken of again. Um, so I've experienced that sort of strict adherence, and I have also experienced now on the private side the you know uh, the need sometimes to speak to others, where perhaps not just the commissioner of whatever department it is you're having an issue with, the ability to look to the governor's office for assistance and asking that they exercise some leadership with regard to a policy or an issue is pretty helpful, I think, from the business community's perspective.
Right.
On the other hand, and there are people in my firm, who lived in the Murphy administration and who have experienced it, and they believe quite convincingly that affording that additional independence, giving lawyers the ability with subject matter expertise to reside with the department head or agency head is a real benefit, and it's rather convincing. So it's a tough call, but I lived in the environment where EO6 was strictly enforced, and I think it worked pretty well.
Okay, well, that actually occurred to me too. Is the whole idea of subject matter expertise? Could you have enough? Could you structure the division of law in such a way that there would be that kind of subject matter expertise, or is that just too much to put into one agency? That with all the different, from environmental protection, from Treasury, from DCA, from Health and Human Services, all of the things, labor, and all of that. Would you be able to put that in the division of law?
It actually is structured that way.
Okay.
That is how the division of law is structured. It's structured in sections and groups that largely correspond to the issues that departments and agencies most frequently see.
Okay. All right. So the infrastructure exists to do the kinds of work that you're suggesting.
It definitely does. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll certainly keep track of that as we go forward here. I also wanted to ask you a little bit about how business is going. Specifically, the group you chair, litigation. Seems like there's always litigation. How's business these days for you?
Yeah, it's been great, Jeff. And I am always, as my friends and colleagues would say, I'm always worried about, what's going to happen next year or the year after. Thankfully, we've been very fortunate to stay really busy, and we have this group of people in litigation that I just I sort of shake my head when I look at the list and say, my goodness, this is a group I'm really proud to be a part of. And we had in the last I guess 6 months or so, we added a former federal prosecutor from the Eastern District of New York,
Hmm.
a fellow named Johnny Algor, who was awarded 2 Bronze Stars for his 2 tours of duty in Iraq,
Okay.
and another former federal prosecutor from the District of New Jersey, Shante Gray, who also worked in the AG's office with me a number of years ago. But I had a client reach out, large entity, and ask, look, could we meet some of the folks in the litigation group? We just like to, get to know the group better. And I said, well, absolutely, we'd love to do that. And so I pulled a group together and asked, former Justice Albin, former Chief Judge Freda Wolfson, former director of the Division of Law, Mike Long, who left, probably a year ago, former head of the New Jersey Bureau of Securities, Chris Gerald, former chief counsel to Governor Murphy, Paramel Garg, former first assistant who worked with me, Peter Slocum, former federal prosecutor and head of the healthcare fraud unit, a fellow named Jason Gould. And the client, after we got done chatting for a bit, said, he felt like he had just met the Justice League.
Okay.
And I, I sort of shook my head, and all I could think about was how proud I am to be part of that group. And
Okay.
that doesn't touch on the great work that the insurance recovery folks are doing under Linda Bennett, and the environmental practice has exploded as well with the addition of an environmental specialist named Keegan Brown. So, business is good. The when we get into September in this business, you pretty much know what the year is going to look like, and we will have had a great year, and hope and pray that it continues next year.
Okay, well, that was the next question I was going to ask, was just about the firm in general. Sounds like you're keeping busy, and you've had a good year, and you're at least what you're expecting at the end of 2025 and into 2026. You're optimistic about the state of the economy, and that the firm is going to do well.
Yeah, I don't see any real storm clouds on the horizon, but maybe that's a good time to get nervous.
Okay, a couple of things before I let you go.
Sure.
National politics in New Jersey. Um, Obviously, the eyes of everybody's watching the gubernatorial race. Only New Jersey and Virginia have those kinds of races this year, so everybody's watching that. But also a lot of what's going on in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'm thinking specifically of Alina Habba, Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, trying to install her as U.S. attorney. The judges in the state, the district, don't want her there. I'm curious as to you have any idea how this is going to play out, and even if you don't know I mean, I won't ask you to predict the outcome, but what's the process like? What is it like being a litigator in federal court in New Jersey now with all that's going on in the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Yeah, look, I don't know how it's going to play out.
Uh-huh.
And I think if you asked, 10 legal scholars, five would tell you it's going to go one way, and five would tell you it's going to go another.
Okay.
I think, look, it's a challenge for the U.S. attorney, or for the interim U.S. attorney, and I forget the title they're using at the moment. But it's a challenge for Ms. Haba. It's a challenge for that office. These cases that we did them in the Attorney General's office. The federal government does them routinely. They're complicated, and
Mm-hmm.
they take a long time to develop. And those initiatives require leadership, and it's hard to move the needle as the head of a group like that, whether it's
Right.
as Attorney General or as the United States Attorney. It's hard to do that over the course of a couple of years. It's way harder to do it in pieces that are measured in months,
Right.
especially when no one knows whether you're staying or not staying. And so I think it is a real challenge, for that office. They're still doing lots of work, and I'm sure doing their absolute best. But I think over time, the challenges will continue to mount. Having said that, it will get resolved one
Okay.
way or the other. And although I think some believe the world is going to end with respect to it, I'm not one of them.
Okay.
So we'll get there. We'll get an answer and a decision, and and we'll keep doing what we're doing.
Right. So from your perspective, the business of the courts has been moving along, and you're able to do your job, and the colleagues of Justice League, as you just described them, are able to work the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, look, there are always changes, right?
Right.
This is a bit of a different circumstance,
It's a bit of a different
no,
circumstance.
no,
Yes.
no question about it.
Right.
But the work continues. I think long term, if the issue is not settled and we don't have some stability, it will impact, ultimately the defense bar, because I think there will be less complex cases to defend. But I'm not in the least bit concerned about that right at the moment. And
Okay.
like I said, I'm optimistic one way or the other. In the relatively short term, this is going to get sorted out.
Okay. And finally, before I let you go, I have to ask you about your own personal, your one of two of your cases. You represent the Trump organization in their dispute with the state over liquor licenses at the golf courses, and you represent Phil Murphy in the investigation that Alina Habba is conducting on, or says she's conducting about immigration and Murphy's handling of that. What's that like? To be representing Donald Trump on one, or the Trump organization on one hand, and Trump's, you know, battling Trump's U.S. attorney pick on the other.
Yeah, so there's not a ton I can say about that, Jeff, but
Okay.
I would say this. I think you know me well enough to know that I'm just not political.
Right.
When Governor Christie nominated me as Attorney General at a press conference, a reporter asked if I was a Republican or a Democrat, and Christie, truthfully, as he of course always is, looked back at the reporter and said, I don't know. You'll have to ask him.
Okay.
It's so I don't decide who I'm going to represent based on their politics or based on their popularity at a given moment. The threshold question for me is always, can we be helpful? Can we add value? And if the answer is yes, I want to get involved. And, sometimes maybe that makes me unpopular with certain of my friends or even certain of my partners. But I don't mind that. That comes to territory. So we've had the privilege of representing some incredible companies, some amazing individuals, and even some governments along the way. We're really grateful for the chance to have that opportunity, and I hope we continue to have that chance. So
Okay.
I hope that's helpful. I'm
Yep.
sure I could add much more than that, but we appreciate the opportunity to handle these kinds of interesting cases, and we're grateful for the trust that the clients place in us.
Right. And I figured that there was a limit to how far you could go. So I appreciate you going as far as you did. And I hope you will come back and talk some more. It's always interesting to get your views on what's going on around the state.
It's always great to talk to you, Jeff. Anytime.
Okay. Thanks. Chris Porrino, former Attorney General, now partner at Lowenstein Sandler. Thanks again for joining us. I really appreciate it.
You got it.
And thank you all for watching. Until next time, stay safe, everyone.